You are listening to the Bat Flip Podcast, a baseball podcast from Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Damian and Matt.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Bat Flip Podcast. My name is Damian, here with two co-hosts this week. Got David and Matt with me back again, just like our trade deadline episode. We're going to bring back the division breakdown, taking a final look at where teams stand going into the final stretch run to the playoffs. And got a bunch of news since we didn't have an episode last week. But before we jump into that, how are you doing, David?
I came down with a little bit of COVID, so I'm a little stuffier than usual tonight. But other than that, I'm perfectly good, and we'll see about how these division breakdowns kind of shake out here. I think we've got some real interesting items to talk about in the baseball landscape. Matt, how you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm doing great. Just started a new workout program, so that's been interesting, and my legs hurt. But other than that, everything's good, and ready to talk about a little bit of baseball. A lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, it's going to be a jam-packed episode, so let's go ahead and jump in. We'll start with the American League East, where the Yankees are still leading the division at 75-48, have an 8-game lead over the Tampa Bay Rays, who are sitting at 66-55. You got the Toronto Blue Jays in third at 65-55, 8.5 back. Then you got the Baltimore Orioles in fourth at 63-58, 11 games back in the division. And then you got Boston at 60-62, 14.5 games back, bringing up the rear of this division.
Yeah, so, starting off, we'll get to the Yankees here in a second, but until looking at it just now, I had no idea the Rays had passed the Blue Jays. Like, I just had no earthly idea. I mean, I don't understand how they continue to do it with the amount of injuries they have. Wander Franco being out most of the year, like, I don't understand. But anyways, let's talk about the Yankees.
Yeah, the Yankees are actually, I think their struggles are a little bit overblown. They're certainly not pulling away like I think everybody thought they would earlier in the season. Aaron Judge is pretty much the biggest story on the Yankees right now, but their starting pitching has kind of been letting them down of late. The thing is, the Yankees still have an 8-game lead in the division. It's not really all that unsafe. They're pretty much 100% locked to make the playoffs at this point. I think the struggles are just a little bit overblown, but what's bad is that if the fans are kind of turning on the players, if the players start to doubt themselves, which I don't think they need to do, they have had some injuries to like Giancarlo Stanton and some other guys. I think that Yankees team is perfectly good enough to make a World Series run here. It's just going to take kind of getting that confidence back and that swagger back that they had early in the season.
Yeah, you talk about that, and I agree with you to a pretty high level. My level of concern for the Yankees on a scale of like 1 to 10 would be like a 6 but that's just concern. And the reason I say that is because of injuries and guys they are not going to get back. They've lost a lot of pitchers. They lost Chad Green early in the season. They've lost Michael King, and pitching wise or starting pitching wise, they lost Severino. They traded Jordan Montgomery. They've had some issues there. Obviously, you talk about Stanton being out, but there is some concern also with just the fact that like Gleyber Torres isn't really hitting that well anymore. Like Matt Carpenter, he's out, but some of these guys like Torres, Carpenter, you didn't expect them to continue some kind of torrid pace all year. So a little bit of his regression to the mean, a little bit of it is just having some injuries. I mean, the Bader, who they traded for, still not back yet. And then you look at some other issues that they have, and just the fact that they've been a little bit unlucky lately. Their BABIP as a team has been pretty low. Just early in the season, if you remember, it seemed like they were winning on a comeback win in the 9th inning or a close game the first 2-3 months of the season, like not on a nightly basis, and you're just not going to be able to do that all year long. So the Yankees are still really good. They're still a World Series contender. They're still probably the best team in the AL East, but their luck's just not quite what it was early in the season, and they've had some bad luck recently with the injuries and stuff. So I think they're going to be fine. Like you say, 8-game lead is big, but I mean they're not an invulnerable team like a lot of people were looking at them as early in the season. So there is some concern there.
Yeah, and then looking at, just mentioning the back end of the bullpen does give you some pause. I mean, like you mentioned, losing Michael King, you've lost Chad Green. Clay Holmes has not been effective and just went on the IL. Aroldis Chapman hasn't looked like himself ever since he's got back, or even for the last year or so, really. Zach Britton did start a rehab assignment today, so maybe they get him back. And then looking at the starting pitching front, Severino did throw a bullpen. They were very encouraged. I guess he was touching 94, 95, and they were very encouraged about what they saw there. So potentially him, coming back sometime in September, helping up the starting rotation. They have got a little bit of juice from calling up guy like Oswaldo Cabrera. I mean, he's been making highlight plays for them. Not really at the plate too much, but he's been a really good defender, even in right field, learning how to play that. And I think he's already robbed a homer and threw somebody out. I mean, they've got a little bit of energy from there. But the Yankees, I mean, they have given you some reason for pause the last month or so, especially after the trade deadline. So you definitely need to get some guys like Bader back. If you can get Stanton back to help that lineup, and then if you can get a guy like Britton and Severino to kind of help that pitching staff in something that seems like it's been reeling as of late.
Yeah, and one last key for the Yankees too, before we move on, is that their big trade deadline acquisition in Frankie Montas has not looked very good. And he had those little shoulder issues right before the trade deadline, but he's pitched through them, which I don't know if that's still affecting him. But tonight he's actually been very good so far against the Mets. I think he's been through like 6 innings, maybe, or 5 innings, 1 run maybe. So he's been a lot better tonight. So maybe he will be able to kind of return on that investment that they put into him recently. But moving on, looking at the the three wild card teams in this division, potentially, which is crazy, and one of them is not the Red Sox. So
Yeah, I'm still mad at the Orioles for selling at the deadline. Remember, they traded their closer and their kind of franchise icon superstar in Trey Mancini, and they've done nothing but win since the deadline. It kind of calls into question that entire decision-making process of why are you selling with the juice and firepower coming up for the minor leagues that the Orioles have. I mean, Adley Rutschman's been transcendent of late, and they just called up Gunnar Henderson, or there were rumors that they were going to call him up. I'm not entirely sure if he's up, but this team is just every second they can call up kind of a superstar potential player from the minors. They had some real juice if they could have just, probably kept the back end of the bullpen together. And it just frustrates me because more teams need to be taking this approach to kind of go ahead and win when you have a chance, because nobody expected the Orioles to be 5 games over 500 at this point and 2.5 games out of the wild card, yet here they are. So they really probably could have used some guys at the trade deadline instead of, selling off some of their better players.
yeah, I agree to a certain level. At the same time, I mean, Trey Mancini's good, but I wouldn't consider him anything close to like a superstar type player. Like he's put up, he's been considered a lot better than he really is, because he's played on a bad Orioles teams and been their best player and been the guy that's been there a long time. So people kind of think of the Orioles, they think of Trey Mancini, but he only has a 115 WRC plus on the season, which is good. But he's also kind of a DH guy. I mean, I know he plays first a little bit, and the Orioles have a lot of guys who can play, first, third, corner outfield. Like that's kind of their strength. So they're kind of trading from a strength. They've got Urias at third, who's been really good this year, and they've got Mountcastle to play first, who's been really good. So, it's kind of like you could throw someone else in the DH spot, and it kind of keeps you from having blocked prospects, and you get to add a pretty good prospect to your farm system too. And then with the closer thing, I mean, it could have been good to keep Jorge Lopez. Obviously, it has allowed Felix Batista to come into his own as a legit closer, and he's looked insanely good. But yeah, I mean, I agree to a certain level. I mean, what's the obviously the Orioles are not going to win the World Series. I mean, they might sneak into the last wild card spot. They're not going to win the World Series, and I get kind of the thought process there, like why just try to sneak into the back of the playoffs when you're going to get smacked by the third division winner, when you could keep building for next year. But at the same time, like, you don't want to tear apart a team that's kind of rolling. And I'll tell you, the one thing, just on the Orioles, Adley Rutschman's been one of the best players, and not best rookie, not best catcher. He's been one of the best players in the big leagues. At age 24 in his rookie season, he has a 139 WRC plus, playing elite defense as a catcher, and has a positive base running metrics, while running a pretty low batting average on balls in play at 296. So it's not like he's been some super lucky hitter come out. He's been insanely good, and he's going to be good for a long time, I'm telling you.
We can't praise Adley enough, I don't think. And he's the kind of guy who's going to lead the Orioles for a really long time. I'm really excited about watching Adley in the future.
Yeah, I mean they're very well set up. I mean Adley's up there. You know, we've already seen what Mountcastle can do. You mentioned Gunnar Henderson's supposed to get the call, or it's been rumored that he's going to get the call within the next week or so. You know, you got to wonder if Grayson Rodriguez didn't have that arm injury or shoulder injury earlier this year, he'd probably be up by now, and you'd be seeing him probably be one of those high level prospects as well. I mean, this team, they're well set up to be really fun for a long time and to make some moves. And, you know, trading a guy like Jorge Lopez, I mean, it does suck and it does mess with the chemistry this year. But in the long run, it might be one of the things that is beneficial. So, beneficial to the long term success of the team, at least. But let's go ahead and move over to the AL Central now, and we'll go ahead and start with the Cleveland Indians at 64-56, leading the division. You got the Minnesota Twins at 62-58, 2 games back. The Chicago White Sox at 62-60, 3 games back. The Kansas City Royals at 50-74, 16 games back, and then Detroit bringing up the cellar of the division at 47-76, 18.5 games back.
Yeah, we can start off talking about the Guardians and how well they have done this year. Obviously we knew coming in Jose Ramirez was going to be great. He always is. But, Andres Jimenez has been incredible for them. One of the guys they got back from the Lindor trade. In fact, Andres Jimenez and Ahmed Rosario, who they also got back in that trade, have both been really, really good this year. Andres Jimenez has a 150 WRC plus and 4.5 wins above replacement on the season this year. I don't think he's getting enough national publicity for how good he has been. And then you can add in there Stephen Kwan, who's been playing left field for them. He has a 9% strikeout rate as a rookie. I mean, that's incredible. But he's not like some of these low strikeout rate guys that they're not striking out because they're swinging at the first pitch and making contact every time. He walks a lot too. He's just got incredible plate discipline and contact skills. He's a 9.5% walk rate, 9% strikeout rate guy. And he's got a 301 average on the season, 373 on base, 396 slugging. That's a 124 WRC plus while being a good base runner and playing a really good outfield. This is a team that they needed a good outfield play, and he's brought it. And also their pitching, their starting pitching's been really good. Shane Bieber, he's not getting talked about enough either. I mean, he's not what he was in 2020 in the shortened season, but I mean a 3.10 ERA on the season, almost 4 wins above replacement for him, a 2.82 FIP, 3.10 ERA. And then Tristan McKenzie's been really, really good, finally living up to some of that billing. His peripherals are a little bit higher than his ERA, but 3.11 ERA for him on the season, pitching a lot of innings. They both stayed really healthy this year. And then, you also look at some of their bullpen guys have been really good, like Emmanuel Clase. I mean, he's been one of the best relievers in baseball. So the Twins, a lot of people are surprised to see. I mean, the Guardians, a lot of people are surprised to see them in first place here. Obviously, everyone kind of picked the White Sox in this division before the season. But, the White Sox have had their issues. They've had their, some of their little turmoil at the top end and a lot of injuries. So I'm not super surprised that the Guardians have been able to take advantage of that.
Here we are a month after the trade deadline or so, almost there. And this division is still not at all wrapped up. And it's still showing off that the 3 of these teams kind of standing pat at the trade deadline was an absolute mistake. All 3 of them should have been going out and trying to acquire that a little bit extra. And the Twins went out and got Tyler Mahle, I guess, but they're still 2 games back. Mahle hasn't quite been as good as Build, and Byron Buxton just went down, so the Twins are definitely hurting right now. It's a winnable division, and the Guardians probably could have put it away. The White Sox have been really, really unlucky. They've had injury issues and then some just strange performance problems that we've seen from them. Like Yohan Moncada's just fallen off a cliff for them. Whereas, and Tim Anderson's been hurt. Whereas, Jose Abreu's having, another really good season, despite him being like 37 years old. It's one of these things and Yasmani Grandal too has fallen off a cliff this season for the White Sox. I hate to see it because the White Sox absolutely probably had the pick of the litter in the AL Central this year, and they have fallen way short of where they should have been. And at this point, it's anybody's game in the Central. I think I like the Guardians the most of these three teams at this point, but this could change drastically as we go through the rest of the season. It's not over yet.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and one of the things with the White Sox is that the talent's still there. I mean, they just have underperformed. Like their second best pitcher on the season by WAR has been Johnny Cueto. I mean, you look at Lucas Giolito has just had a rough year. A lot of that's BABIP driven too. I mean, he's got a 366 batting average on balls in play hit against him, which is insane. There's no way that's sustainable. He has a 361 expected FIP, but a 5.34 ERA is really high. It sounds like he's had a horrible year, but I think he's probably going to be. I think he's had some bad luck, and you got to remember too that guys like Lance Lynn missed a lot of time and came back and just hadn't been great. It's been tough for them, and then same deal with the hitters. I mean, you look at guys like you mentioned Moncada and Grandal and a bunch of these guys, Pollock, who they traded for right before the season, has had a rough year. I mean, everyone wants to blame Tony La Russa, and obviously Tony La Russa is not a good manager, but at the same time, I mean, some of their guys have just underperformed, and a lot of it's been bad luck too, a lot of injuries and just different issues. And I agree. I mean, White Sox probably could have added something at the deadline. The Guardians definitely should have added something at the deadline. And of course, but we sit here and the team that was leading at the deadline that did add in the Twins, who added Lopez and they added Michael Fulmer and they added one of the better pitchers in the market, Tyler Mahle, has underperformed since then. So it's been definitely interesting to see the top of this division. But I do want to mention the two teams at the bottom here. We'll get to the Tigers in a minute because of some news, but the Royals have been really weird this year. But honestly, I kind of like some of the things that are happening with them right now. Some of the guys coming up have kind of performed pretty well. Like Vinny Pasquantino is performing really, really well at the plate. That's been fun to see. And then they actually just called up the guy they traded for, Drew Waters, earlier, and I think he delivered a game-winning walk yesterday, maybe. And then obviously, they've got some pretty cool young players. MJ Melendez has been really good at the plate too. He's looked solid, although he needs to work on whether if he's going to be an outfielder, he needs to work on that defense. So if he's going to be a catcher, then we don't really see it. But it's that the Royals have had some interesting things for their future. Not that they'll put it together, but.
A quick note on the Royals before we turn it over to Damien for the Tigers news. Bobby Witt Jr. has been really good too, stealing a lot of bases, hitting for power. Isn't doing much else, but I think that guy's going to be a star. It's just going to take some time for him to get used to the big leagues. He's still really, really young. So, yeah, a lot of good, exciting young players on the Royals, and they did finally trade off Whit Merrifield. So, going in the right direction, I think.
Just a little late on that one.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Vila, right?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. So the Tigers let go of their general manager, Alavila. Last week they let him go? Or was it 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, it was,
last
2 weeks. I think it was one of the two.
One of the two. Whatever. Doesn't matter. They let him go. I think ending was it 10-year, 15-year run of him being the... When did he take over after Dombrowski?
I think Dombrowski left like right as the Tigers were about to have to rebuild. Like it was like 2014 maybe.
Yeah, so it's been 8 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Ending that run, they're going to go into the offseason and try and find their GM of the future. There's already been rumors about what's his name with AJ Hinch from the Astros. I just blanked on it now. Somebody help me out here.
For an Astros
GM?
GM?
The GM that was there with AJ Hinch.
Oh, I don't remember.
The one that got fired for all the sign stealing stuff as well.
Yeah, I know what you're
Jeff Luhnow?
Yeah, Luhnow, that's right.
Jeff Luhnow. There's already been some rumors that Jeff Luhnow might be in the, in the talks or in the discussion at least for that, just with the AJ Hinch connection there, and the Illiches kind of being, kind of willing to maybe start looking to sell the team, so might not care about the rep as much anymore. I don't know, but it's going to be interesting to see what the Tigers do moving forward. They did sign a big contract this year in Javi Baez and Eduardo Rodriguez. Javi hasn't really worked out all that well. You just got Eduardo Rodriguez back, I believe, this week. He just came back and made his first start with them. So they and Miguel Cabrera committed to playing for next year. So they're still going to have some bigger contracts on the books, but you have seen some of the young talent. Riley Green's come up. He's shown flashes, not been great overall, but and Torkelson as well. He struggled and he'll need to get called back up. But it's going to be interesting to see what the Tigers do moving forward because they have some good pitching prospects down there, and they have a couple really good hitting prospects. They just need to be able to fill out around them and kind of allow them to build.
Yeah, the thing that worries me about the Tigers is that you went out and you got Javier Baez to a huge contract. It was like 6 years, 140, I think. And I could tell you the day that he signed that contract that it was going to be a bad contract because this is a guy who obviously has been a really, really good player, but his unique skill set that he's had is one that probably isn't going to age fantastic. I mean, he doesn't put the ball in play very well. He has a horrible approach at the plate, doesn't walk, strikes out a lot, and he's very BABIP driven and he's very power driven at the plate. And as he ages a little bit, some of that power and just that raw athleticism that allows him to make his approach work doesn't work as well. He's still a good defender and he's still a good base runner. He's going to always be that to a certain level, but defense doesn't age all that well either, and base running doesn't age all that well. So, Javi Baez is a guy who's exciting, but sometimes when these teams go out, when you go out and you're in a situation like the Tigers were in this past offseason, you want to go like jumpstart your future, you need to go out and get the top guy on the market. Like you can't go out and get somebody who is pretty good and sign him to a big contract to make him the centerpiece of your team. Like you have to do what the Rangers did and go out and get Corey Seager, or do what the Padres did a few years ago, go out and get Manny Machado. Like when you're about to pull out of a rebuild, like that's the type of thing you need to do, or just let your young guys come up and figure it out because now they've got another bad contract on their books, or two bad contracts when you consider Eduardo Rodriguez. So you add that to the fact that a lot of their pitching prospects have either gotten injured, like Casey Mize, underperformed, and Matt Manning, hadn't really, he's been injured a lot too, but he hadn't really done all that much at the big league level yet. Some of these guys, they just haven't really figured it out. Some of their guys are struggling in AAA. And the fact that your guys you called up that you were thinking, hey, this guy's going to be our next star. Spencer Torkelson has been horrible at the big league level. And you also look at Riley Green has been okay, but hadn't really been number one prospect worthy at the big league level. So this is a team that I'm really struggling to see their future, like a lot of people were seeing before the season. And honestly, this might end up being a situation where a team has to blow it up like a second time into another rebuild, where they trade Tarik Skubal, who's had a good year. They trade a couple of their top relievers who have had good years. I don't really know. I don't know where this team's going to go next.
I don't envy whoever takes over for Al
I
Avila.
know.
Yeah, and the one thing, and then we'll jump over to the AOS. The one thing is that they have shown the willingness before to spend money. So, if you get the Miguel Cabrera contract off the books next year, sure, you have the Javi Baez one. Eduardo Rodriguez has shown to still be a pretty solid pitcher. I mean, he's not an ace level pitcher, but he's a guy who could be a 2 or 3 in a rotation. And if you're able to build a guy like Tyler Skubal, Casey Mize, if you're able to get Matt Manning back up there, and develop some of your other prospects. I know they just drafted Jackson Joe, but he's really young, but he has a bright future ahead of him as well. I don't think it's as bad as people have made it out to be so far. It's just not a thing that somebody's going to go in there and compete right away. It's still going to take 2 or 3 years down the road until they're ready for that point. And they're going to have to be smart with how they actually spend the money.
Yeah, and one thing that the Tigers need to do too is they need to develop talent better. I mean, like if you look at Jackson Job's numbers, like I know he's 19, but he's getting rocked in A-ball this year. I mean, it's this is supposed to be like your number one prospect, and they're not developing their prospects very well. I mean, a lot of guys have shown their farm system is not. There's some teams that do a great job developing farm, and there's some teams that do a horrible job, and the Tigers have not done a good job at all. Like, I can't remember a player that came up through the Tiger system recently that came up and did well at the big league level. Like, it's just it's been, I mean, and that when you do that, I mean, every team, even the teams that have spent big with payroll, have developed a lot of players on their own. I mean, like, look at the Dodgers. I mean, they're the biggest spender, but I mean, most of their core was developed in house. I mean, look at the Braves who won the World Series last year. All their entire team was built in house. Look at the Yankees. Their entire team, for the most part, a lot of their team, not their entire team, but a lot of their key players were developed in house. I mean, it's hard to build just through free agency. They got to do something to develop these players better.
Well, it's almost like a new GM will take over and probably bring in his own scouting department. So
That's what they need. So
that's probably good for them. But let's jump over to the American League West, where we have the Astros leading the division at 78-45. You have the Mariners 66-56, 11 and a half games back. The Rangers at 56-66, 21 and a half games back. The Angels at 52-70, 25 and a half games back. And then the A's at 45-78, 33 games back. And there's been some interesting news about this division over the past couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, this division's probably the least interesting when it comes to the race at the top because, I mean, the Astros are just running away with it. So, but yeah, you've got the Rangers and the Angels making a lot of interesting news.
Yeah, and the news being Art Moreno's considering selling the Angels, which is, I think, pretty huge for baseball in general, because it's the kind of thing that could both shake up the landscape regarding a Shohei Ohtani trade in the offseason. It could also, potentially include a Shohei Ohtani extension in the offseason that may set the mark for future big free agent contracts. So, a new owner is going to have to come in and change the way things are done in the Angels organization, because, from top to bottom, their free agent signings last year really just didn't pan out very well, other than Noah Syndergaard, who was good enough to get traded at the deadline for some prospects. And that was good, but you've got to capitalize more when you've got a team, with Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani on it. Anthony Rendon's been effectively a disaster to this point, and it's not Rendon's fault. He's been hurt, but that contract, just looking back on it, seems like a really poor decision. And that's the kind of contract that a owner with a sight on the future, building an established team around their superstars, may rethink and consider more closely. I do think that a new change of ownership is good, and a lot of teams may actually need it, but the Angels may be like the first team I would think of if I was thinking of a team who needs a new owner. I mean, they have just been in turmoil, purgatory, basically, with Mike Trout. They literally have the best player in baseball, and they can't win anything with him. They've only made the playoffs one time in Trout's career.
Yeah, so a couple things there. The thing about Art Moreno is that obviously the team hasn't been successful since he's been there, and he seems to be a little bit of a meddler too in some ways. But I mean, obviously, like, he's willing to spend money. I mean, Mike Trout's has had at times the biggest contract in baseball. I don't think it's the biggest contract in baseball right now. Obviously, they've spent big on Anthony Rendon. They spent big on Albert Pujols. They spent big on Josh Hamilton. They spent big on David Freese. They're spent big on a ton of guys. They just haven't worked out for the most part. But what they need to do is they need a GM in there, and I don't know, it might be Perry Minasian who's their current GM. He just got there like a year ago. It might end up being somebody else that comes in with a new ownership, but or potentially new ownership. But they really need somebody to come in and have a plan going forward, because it seems like every year they have these two or three really, really good players, but they don't have a plan. They don't have a plan of how to make the team better. I mean, this team's been devoid on pitching for a long time and depth in their lineup for a long time. I mean, they've had these top 3 or 4 players, but it seems like every time they need somebody, they sign some washed up veteran, or not, maybe not washed up, but they sign a veteran who's quite obviously like gonna be on the downturn, or in like Anthony Rendon's case, they just have some bad luck on it too. I mean, I don't think anybody can see that coming completely. I mean, he did deal with injury issues in Washington at times, but not to this level. but it's a weird thing with them. I will say that a couple of their deadline moves worked out pretty well so far. Logan O'Hop's been absolutely killing it for them in Double A since he got traded there for Brandon Marsh, who's just kind of a meh outfielder at this point. Obviously he's still young, so he could turn it around. But I mean, he's got a 70 WRC plus since going over to Philly. So that that might end up being a really really good trade going forward. But I mean, they're another team too, like we mentioned earlier. Just they got to develop these guys. I mean, they didn't develop Brandon Marsh. Joe Adele was this raw athlete who was such a good athlete that he could almost make it work with no development, and he still didn't develop. I mean,
Just
and then pitching wise, like you look at guys like Reed Detmers has seemed to be okay, but they've had a lot of good pitchers or a lot of good pitching prospects come up and just not really do much. So definitely something to look for with the Angels going forward. But it'll be the big news will be what's going to happen with Otani, and this is also going to be a tough team to sell because Mike Trout's got that gigantic contract. Anthony Rendon's got that gigantic contract. You know, it's going to be kind of tough to sell this team because that payroll is going to be tough to bring down if a new owner needs a start off with a lower payroll. So because those contracts are probably not movable. So
Yeah, you look at the way they've brought Zach Neto into their organization, their first round pick. Neto's a pretty, advanced shortstop. They've already got him in Double A, which is extremely over aggressive to the point that they may end up harming his development. By promoting him so aggressively. And I'm all for aggressive promotion, but this just seems extreme when it comes to Neto, who's never played above the college level and is all of a sudden thrust into Double A, a month and a half after being drafted. So Angels are definitely kind of a big question mark, I think, right now, and they're definitely the most interesting of the AL West teams.
I was going to say, to be fair for Zach Neto, he's been pretty dang good in Double A so far. He's got a 145 WRC plus. It's a small sample size though, so
It might work out for him, but that's the
you
kind
never
of
know.
yeah,
Just
that's the
never
kind of
know.
thing that just it's so aggressive
Yeah.
that you can't make those mistakes. You can't lose a guy like Zach Neto
Yeah.
to like you've lost a guy like Brandon Marsh or Joe Adele. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also in this division, to bring with the Rangers, also have fired their manager Chris Woodward or let him go, and then also released GM John Daniels from his position, and I believe he was a special advisor or some president of baseball operations or something. Chris Young, former big league pitcher, has taken over day-to-day operations, and will basically be kind of the GM going forward. He said that they plan on hiring a GM at some point, but not in the near future, and maybe not even in the off season.
Yeah.
I
So
I
yeah, go ahead, David.
I love this move, man. I think this is the perfect time to do this. You need to get out in front of it as opposed to waiting for a big signing like they've made and a kind of an aggressive push to not work. They're out in front of it. They went, oh, this year we wanted to be better. We're not. And I don't think anybody put the Rangers into playoff contention with their offseason, but they said, oh, the Rangers are now like 2 years away. The Rangers are now out ahead of it. They're going to be an attractive destination for GMs. It's kind of the opposite situation the Angels are in, where the Rangers are not in bad contracts. I don't think Simeon or Seager is going to be a bad contract at this point. And they have a lot of young talent. Their farm system is one of the best in baseball. So this is an attractive situation, and it's a really good time to get ahead of this, where you can grab a good manager that your star players can kind of control who it is, and then your GM's going to have a wealthy amount cash of prospects in order to deal from, in order to complement their star players at the big league level.
Yeah, I don't fully understand the GM part of it because I think that the GM or that John Daniels had done a pretty good job of helping build this team, but obviously they really like Chris Young. I think his position was actually general manager this year, but he didn't oversee. But John Daniels was the baseball operations president, and now Chris Young's going to control all the decision making. But I mean, I thought the Corey Seager signing was a great signing, and I think it's gone extremely well so far. I mean, he's had a very unlucky year, but he's still got a 123 WRC plus. Has actually improved at shortstop over his previous seasons and has put up 4 wins above replacement. He's been really good. Um, this is a team that has a lot of young talent, and they've had some of those breakout type performers this year too, like Jonah Heim. He's kind of had that breakout this year, almost 3 wins above replacement. Played great defense behind the plate, and he's hit really well. 117 WRC plus. Nathaniel Lowe, 132 WRC plus. First baseman. Obviously he's not a good defensive first baseman. Probably should be a DH full time, but he's been really really good this year at the plate. I mean they've had some good things, and I mean this team is exactly what we thought it was going to be. I mean their offense has not a lot of depth, but they have some really good players at the top of it, and they're dangerous. And their pitching really only has a couple of pretty decent guys, and then they don't really have a lot behind them. So I mean I feel like this team's been probably as they should be this year, and they're on track. And I agree with the Woodward thing. I mean, obviously there was some issues there with the Rangers weren't exactly excited about having him around, and I've heard that a lot of people around there don't really like him that much. So that didn't surprise me too much, even though I mean I don't think the team really underperformed or anything. So.
They've also got advanced pitching in the minors with Jack
Oh
Leiter
yeah.
and Kumar Rocker,
Yeah.
two
Well.
guys who are
Yeah.
drafted 2 and 3 the last couple of years. So
Yeah.
I
I do
think both of
worry
those
about
guys can
Leiter.
be.
I do worry
We'll
about
see.
Leiter a lot. He's been really bad this year at Double A.
First
So
run through, though, I
yeah,
think he'll grow.
yeah, it's
Yeah, I think
still
he'll be fine.
yeah, he probably will be okay. But man, a 5.50 ERA in Double A for a 22-year-old advanced college pitcher. I mean, it's a little
20,
scary. I mean, but
22 in Double A is still young.
it's
You
fairly
expect a
young.
Double A to be 23,
Yeah,
24. So
yeah, it's fairly young. But we'll see what happens with him.
also the
Yeah.
Mariners are in position currently to make the playoffs for the first time since 2001 and break the longest playoff-less drought.
Yeah, I mean, I like how we go through this entire division, not
Yeah.
mention the Mariners, but like, there's really not that much to talk about. I mean, they're kind of like, they're as long as they don't implode, they're probably going to make the playoffs. They can't catch the Astros. They're going to be a pretty dangerous team, I feel like, in the playoffs. And one other mention too that the A's called up Shea Langoliers this week or last week, and to the big league level. So, maybe a little bit of looking to the future there. That's a pretty good piece for them. So.
Yeah, and we've talked about the Mariners so much here, and I was gonna get around to mentioning them because we kind of just jumped right to the Angels and Rangers talk, but one of the more aggressive teams getting a guy like Luis Castillo at the deadline. I mean, we've talked about the rotation before. They have a pretty good top four that in that rotation that could help them make a pretty substantial playoff run. If the hitting will stay around, Julio Rodriguez, Ty France, and the rest of those guys can continue to do what they have done so far this season. So hopefully the Mariners are able to break that longest drought because I think it's been 2001. I think it's 22 years or 20 years, somewhere around
2001.
there.
21
Yeah.
years, 2001.
And then also we need to mention what Justin Verlander has done this year. Just absolutely outrageous, phenomenal for a guy who is 39 years old, coming off Tommy John surgery, to have 143 innings pitched so far this year, a 195 ERA with a FIP that's still just 288. I mean, the xFIP is a little high at 3.4, but I mean, just wild the type of season that he's had. And I know David and I were talking a little bit, about him before the show, and for me to dive into the numbers and see how good he's actually been, actually looking into it, not just on the surface level. It's been pretty fun for sure.
Yeah, he's special.
But well, let's jump over to the National League East now, where we have the New York Mets at 79 and 45, leading the division. We got the Atlanta Braves at 76 and 48, 3 games back. You got the Philadelphia Phillies at 67 and 55, 11 games back. The Marlins at 53 and 69, 25 games back. And then the Washington Nationals at 41 and 82, 37 and a half games back. I think that's the biggest number I've said in a long time so far that we've been doing these division breakdowns.
Yeah, so just looking at the NL East, the Mets are still good. There's the big series between the top two teams last week. The Braves took 3 out of 4 and kind of kept themselves in the race, but the Mets, rebounded over the weekend and smacked the Phillies around. And they look to be. It looks like they're going to be tough to catch. They also have one of the weakest schedules remaining. I think they have a series against the Dodgers and a series against the Braves, but other than that, it's like an extremely weak schedule. In fact, they have a 470 remaining strength of schedule winning percentage. So, I would expect the Mets to probably still win this. You look at the playoff odds and the division winning odds. The Mets are like about 80%. The Braves are about 20%. So, definitely interesting there. The Braves are kind of on another hot streak again. Not quite what they did with the 14 straight wins they had at the start of June, but they've been really hitting the ball well, pitching well lately. And then the Phillies are kind of in position for the playoffs, which is finally. I mean, the Phillies they're not quite the Mariners, but I mean, I think they haven't made the playoffs in like 10 years, maybe, um, 11 years. So the Phillies they're not a lock yet, but they're looking pretty good right now. So definitely this division's finally kind of what it was billed to be. The last couple of years where it kind of collapsed early.
Yeah, so just to mention a couple things, one with the Braves, over the past couple weeks, they signed Michael Harris to that 8-year, $72 million extension that has a couple years of options that can take it up to $102 million for 10 years. And then with the Phillies, Bryce Harper is eyeing a September 1st return. He started his rehab assignment today and homered in his first at bat off a lefty already. So if the Phillies are able to add a guy like Bryce Harper, who was, the reigning National League MVP from last year, into that lineup, that they're already starting to kind of click a little bit more and the pitching starting to come around, it could really make that wild card race, even a little bit better there. But just the couple pieces of news kind of from the NL East there with the Harris extension and Harper.
Just
Yeah.
looked at
Oh, go ahead.
just one quick little thing there with the Phillies lineup. Kyle Schwarber has the second most home runs in the major leagues right now with 34. That is a grand total of 14 home runs shy of first place with Aaron Judge.
Yeah.
So I want to just relitigate how incredible a season Aaron Judge is having overall. 48 home runs, about to hit 50. We're not even at September yet.
Yeah, it's insane. But he hit the one tonight too.
That
Judge,
takes him to 48, yeah.
yeah, 48. So yeah, and you mentioned the Michael Harris extension. I want to elaborate on that just a little bit. I think it's interesting. I think the Braves first free agent out of their entire lineup, other than Dansby Swanson, who's a free agent this year, is 2027 in Ozzy Albies. So it's like out of the Braves typical lineup, there's one guy that's not under control past 2026, which is absolutely insane. Um, and obviously Michael Harris is an interesting move in that he's a rookie and he's been really really good this year. There are things that are a little risky long term with him. You know, his approach has been kind of iffy. He's got a super high chase rate, and his BABIP's been pretty high all year. But he's also a guy who got called up straight from Double A. After 100 plate appearances at Double A. I mean, so I'm not too worried about that. I think it probably will end up being a good contract for the Braves. And but yeah, the Michael Harris thing is good, and then Bryce Harper coming back, that helps the Phillies a lot. Although I don't know if it's quite I mean, obviously it's a talent improvement, but the guys they've had replacing him have performed pretty well. So it's not like he's replacing someone who's been an absolute disaster in their lineup. Except I guess they could replace Castellanos, who's been a disaster. But I still don't think Bryce Harper's going to play the field, right?
No, he won't. He's still got the torn UCL, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I thought so. I thought he still can't play the field. So, but we'll see what happens with him coming back. Obviously, I think he'll hit well as he always does. So.
Can I just say, as a Cubs fan, how jealous I am of the Braves' strategy right here? I mean, they have locked up an entire, group of guys that for relatively, team-friendly deals, but they're also not nobody's going to judge Michael Harris for taking $70 million before he's ever played, more than a year of baseball. That's an incredible deal for Michael Harris. Right. But, that's also, if Harris becomes kind of a star center fielder, that's a steal for the Braves. So what a job by the Braves front office to identify those potential stars and then go ahead, get them locked in. They know where they're going to be for the next 5 to 10 years. They know who their teammates are going to be. That's just the kind of thing that can keep a clubhouse together the whole time, and I really think that's the kind of thing that's brought the Braves together, which has brought them closer to the Mets.
Yeah, and I'll tell you real quick with the Braves too, in that the guys that they brought up, everyone made a big deal out of at the start of the season how the Braves had the worst farm system in baseball. But look who's got the two leading candidates for Rookie of the Year, and then a guy who has played like he probably should be Rookie of the Year since he got called up, but he's not going to have enough plate appearances. But like they're three of their key players right now are came out of their farm system this year, and I think that's something that everyone talks about, like that player development's so important, and then identifying them, and then being able to obviously, like you say, bring them up at the big league level and sign them to extensions too. Um, I mean, I think that it's a lot of fun for me as a Braves fan. I tell you, we're going to be able to watch these guys for years to come, and it eliminates a lot of question marks, and you can kind of focus on the pitching side, which is a lot more volatile year to year. I think that's kind of the big thing. They could just say, okay, the lineup's dealt with and done. We need to focus on the pitching side and make sure we're not, because that's such a weird, like, it's tough to sign pitchers to long-term extensions because there's always that injury risk there.
Yeah, and then another thing to mention with the Braves as well is that they have at least started exploratory talks with Dansby Swanson on an extension, and might try to lock him up before he ever hits free agency this year, regardless. And like you mentioned, he was the one guy that might be a free agent before 2027 or whatever it is, and they might lock him up ever before he ever gets there, anyways. So, I mean, Alex Stopoulos has put on a clinic of how to build a team and keep it together for long term. And you have to shout out to all those players that are willing to take a little bit less money, or in some cases a lot less money, to keep the team and keep the camaraderie together, for long term vision, and want to play together. So that is a great job by the Braves players and by Alex Anthopoulos of putting this clinic on of how to build a team for the long term. But let's jump over to the National League Central, where we have the St. Louis Cardinals leading the division at 70-52. You got the Milwaukee Brewers 65-56, 4.5 games back. You got the Chicago Cubs at 53-69, 17 games back. The Cincinnati Reds at 48-72, 21 games back, and then the Pittsburgh Pirates at 47-75, 23 games back.
Yeah, I mean, starting off, you can just talk about the Cardinals and how the fact that Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt are insane, and that Albert Pujols is on a heater right now and it's been insane, and which is shocking. And I mean, they've been so good. I want to elaborate a little bit. I was looking at some of the obviously we'll talk a lot in a minute about Albert Pujols, but I want to talk about Paul Goldschmidt. I don't think people quite realize, and it's not as big of a thing as it used to be, but Paul Goldschmidt is like legitimately close to being a Triple Crown guy again. He's second in RBIs by 2. He's second in home runs by 3, and he leads the National League in average. So like he's got a legitimate shot if he has a good September at winning the Triple Crown this year, which is absolutely insane. And he's got a pretty comfortable lead on Freeman in average. Not a huge lead, but it's fairly comfortable, about 16 points of average. And RBIs wise, he's really doesn't have any. I mean, he's got 16 over third place, so I don't think anybody's going to jump over him and Pete Alonso. And then home run wise, like he's tied with Riley and Alonso, and Alonso's one behind him. But he's got to catch Kyle Schwarber there. So he has a shot at the Triple Crown, which nobody's really talking about, which is kind of insane.
I would think part of that is kind of the reduction of the Triple Crown after Miguel
Right.
Cabrera won it. You know what I mean? Like RBI is not quite as admired stat these days. It's super important, but it's not everything, and I think everybody kind of realizes that now.
Yep.
But the fact that Goldschmidt's having a year like this, where he had kind of fallen off, and everybody had kind of assumed, well, Goldschmidt's starting to, fall off and get older. 34. He's had a kind of mediocre last couple of years. Everybody kind of assumed that he would just kind of fade into oblivion, and he's gone out and had to put up a 419 on base percentage and a 630 slugging percentage en route to what is effectively thus far an MVP campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you to add on to that, the fact that the second best player in the National League by wins above replacement by a pretty decent margin too has been Nolan Arenado, who nobody's talking about because his teammate's doing so good. So it's pretty crazy how the Cardinals have both of these trades and big contracts have worked out so well for the Cardinals.
As a Cubs fan, I can tell you it's hardly
Yeah.
surprising.
Well, yeah. I mean, it is the Cardinals, and they always seem to have the devil magic. But
Yeah, and we'll talk about another one of their kind of trade steals here in a little bit, but the Cardinals have just found a way. I mean, they always do find that way, to get people in there and just make them, take that next step to an upper echelon player somehow, some way. But looking at the rest of that division, I mean, you got Milwaukee, we've talked about them before, and we talked about them at the deadline, but it seems like the whole clubhouse dynamic has really kind of changed ever since the Josh Hader trade. You can't really say that they downgraded with how bad Hader's been, but I think it has messed with the clubhouse a little bit, at least in my opinion.
It has. It's very clear. Eric Lauer came in and talked about that last week and said that because the front office didn't go out and acquire players while they had the lead at the trade deadline in the division, that changed the attitude in camp and that changed the attitude of the clubhouse. And judging by their field of play, I mean, they played the Cubs this last week and barely avoided a sweep in that final game. The Brewers do not look like the same team that was leading the Central just a couple of weeks ago. I mean, they are just not playing well at this point.
And then they
yeah,
decided to shut out the Dodgers yesterday, so that's great.
well, it was Eric Lauer against the Dodgers, so that happens when he pitches against the Dodgers. But
So just a little side note there, he is the best pitcher by ERA in the history against the Dodgers
yeah,
of active pitchers, I should say.
unbelievable.
It is outrageous what he is able to do. Him and Zach Davies both. I don't
Yeah.
understand it. Both Milwaukee Brewers legends.
Yeah, but looking at talking about the Brewers, a part of that probably clubhouse dynamic. That's definitely part of it, but part of it too, I think, is just regression because they weren't gonna. This offense. I mean, you look at their collection of talent, and Willie Adames is a really good shortstop. He's a good player. Jace Peterson has been their second best player this year, surprisingly, and he's actually had a pretty good season. 112 WRC plus for him. He's only played 80 games. But other than that, I mean, like Christian Yelich is just not that good anymore. I mean, he's okay. He's an average everyday player at this point. Hunter Renfroe's been decent for them, but I mean, you look down the list, like Keston Hiura has been one of their better players in 53 games, but he has a 43% strikeout rate. He's been one of their best hitters. I mean, and then pitching wise, like they've dealt with the injuries at times. Brandon Woodruff missed a lot of time. Freddie Peralta missed a ton of time. I think he's back now, but this is just a team that I just don't think is all that good. Like they don't have. There's just nobody in their offense that scares you like at all. And then their pitching, like outside of Corbin Burns, who's had another great season, but maybe not quite what he was last year. Like they're just not. Brandon Woodruff is a good pitcher. He's a really good number two. It's just you know, uh, they just don't have the depth as a team, and I just don't think they're all that good. So they had a great start to the year. They had some guys overperforming. They were kind of rolling a little bit, but I just think that the Cardinals just have a lot more talent. And the reason that a lot of people picking the Brewers, including myself, is the weak division. And I think that the Brewers just aren't that good. So um, they still have a chance to make the playoffs. They're 65 and 56. They could turn it around. I mean, I think they're like one game behind the Phillies maybe for the third wild card. So, they're not that far behind the Padres who are collapsing too. So, we'll see what happens with them, but definitely a team that's struggling right now.
And just to jump on the three kind of cellar dwellers of the NL Central real quick, the Cubs have been playing really good baseball of late,
Yeah.
and it's very frustrating because the Cubs absolutely could have played like this all season. This division was weak. You just mentioned it. And the Cubs were wasting their time with Jonathan Villar, Jason Hayward, Andrelton Simmons. They had every opportunity, I think, to jump on this. And Chris Morel's been a bit of a revelation, and they've seen Justin Steele and Keegan Thompson kind of explode into starter potential. But, they could have been here. Their rotation got decimated in the early part of the season, and now it's finally healthy and kind of producing. But that's just unfortunate. This is my 60 cents on the Cubs. Is they're playing now like I envisioned they would play this season if they would have a successful season. And I think our goal was kind of always 75 to 80 wins, around 500. Show us you're moving the right direction, and they might get there, but they might get there at the cost of a good draft pick at this point. So it's a little bit of I'm not sure I'm too excited about it, but I'd much rather see them playing well down the stretch here.
Yeah, well, that whole resurgence has really came with the acquisitions of Franmil Reyes and getting Nick Madrigal back, right, David?
Hey, look, I have to jinx them if they're to succeed, and
Yeah. Well, I was gonna elaborate a little bit at somebody. Obviously, David's a Cubs fan, and somebody that doesn't follow him that closely. But for me, I never thought the Cubs would be very good at all this year. I think I picked them fourth in the division and everything. But the thing that they needed was some of these players, these young players, to step up. Like Nico Horner has been really, 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 really good this year, and they've really seemed to have a guy that they can kind of lock in on for the future. Wilson Contreras has been really good, and Ian Happ's been really good too. Those are guys who, I mean, I don't know what ends up happening with Contreras in the offseason. I don't know if they extend him or not, but those are guys who, all three of those guys are guys they could build around in the future. Seiya Suzuki's been decent.
meh.
He's had his, yeah, I mean, he hadn't been completely lost. So maybe after that adjustment period we talked about before the season this year, maybe he eventually ends up getting to a level of, being really good at the big league level. He's done some good things this year for sure. He's just been a little inconsistent. And then you look at like you mentioned Christopher Morel. He's definitely showed that he's got big league talent. I think he's been a little bit lucky, a little bit too. But a lot of he's got good metrics on his base running. He's got a lot of athleticism, and he's hit the ball well, and he's hit for some power too, which is nice. Obviously, a 31% strikeout rate is going to have to come down, but he's not overmatched at the big league level as a rookie. So he looks like a guy you can maybe throw into that core for the future too. So they've got some good pieces there, and then the pitching, like you mentioned. I mean, Justin Steele, you talked about, he's been really good, and Marcus Stroman's been not quite what they hoped he would be. He's obviously dealt with a little bit of injury too, but he's been good. And another thing for the Cubs too is their farm system seems to be improving. Like the guys in it seem to be developing some, which is nice.
We don't have enough time to talk about the Cubs farm system.
Right,
I
but
could go on and on.
Yeah, the guys there are developing, and to that matter, you talk about the Reds too with the farm system stuff. A lot of their guys are developing in their farm too, and they've made some really good acquisitions there. So while the Reds have obviously been worse than the Cubs at the big league level this year, and their farm system's developing too, that's something to kind of look at going forward. Is those bottom three teams, all three of them are starting to look like they have a pretty good future. I'm not, the Pirates, some of their guys who have come up recently worry me a little bit. Like O'Neal Cruz has not been good. I think he'll be fine. He's a rookie. Rookies aren't always great, but it takes time for some guys. But I definitely think that that these three teams have a future. So
yeah, they at least give you some hope looking
Yeah.
forward of what they could be, and what they will be in a couple, in a couple years or whatever. But let's move over to the NOS, which has probably been the most noteworthy, newsworthy division over the past couple weeks. But with the Dodgers leading the division at 84-37, you got the Padres at 68-56, 17 and a half games back. You got the San Francisco Giants at 60-61, 24 games back. Arizona at 55-66, 29 games back. And then Colorado at 53-70, 32 games back. But most of the news from this division is coming from those top two teams.
Yeah, so I guess we'll start off. I'll start off because it'll be a lot more brief, and then we can get into the long story. But the Dodgers lost Walker Buehler for the season officially. He had Tommy John surgery today, which also hurts them because they lose him next year too. So I guess he's a free agent after next year, right?
I believe he's 24, if
24,
I'm not
okay.
mistaken. After
So,
24, yeah.
So I guess he has not thrown his last pitch as a Dodger, hopefully, if it's 24. So, but that's a big blow to the Dodgers. They've had the pitching injuries have added up a little bit. Obviously, the team is absolutely rolling
they might
right now, and
They might not win 115 games.
yeah, Yeah, but when it comes to the postseason, I mean, you do worry just a little bit about the pitching because of Walker Buehler not coming back when you thought you were going to get him back. Kershaw, we don't know what he's going to end up looking like. Obviously, Dustin May has come back and looked good so far, so that's good for the Dodgers. But right now it's like Urias, May, and I guess Anderson would be or Gonsolin would be your postseason starters in your first 3 games. So I don't know how much like that's not the same as Bueller, Urias, May, Kershaw, all these guys that they had throwing out there at the beginning of the season. But I mean, the bullpen's good and the offense is so good that it probably is not going to matter that much. But but definitely noteworthy that Walker Bueller is going to be missing the all of the rest of this year and all of next year. So.
Speaking of that offense on the Dodgers, Max Muncy did receive an extension
Yes.
here for 1 year, $13.5 million with a 2024 option. Believe that's going to be a mutual option, might be a club option, but to me, Muncy staying out of free agency, hitting age 32 seems a little bit strange. But that being said, and I think Damian can probably back this up, being the Dodger fan who has kind of followed that from the get go. It's a much more important thing to a guy like Max Muncy to play where he's currently playing in the situation he's currently playing in because they believe in him and they've built him into the player that he is. And Muncy's, I think honoring that and believes that he'll, retain that 5-win form that he had 3 of the last 5 seasons.
Yeah, he mentioned in his media scrum yesterday after it that he probably could have got more money elsewhere if he would have hit the free agent market. He probably could have got a longer term deal, but that right now, LA's home. They're the team that really gave him the opportunity, believed in him when a lot of people didn't, and that he really feels like it's a family. So that the money is not really what's important to him. The chance to stay with, a club that he considers family, and then to stay with, just to stay in that organization in general and have a chance to win was really big to him that way. And he even mentioned that he's open to even getting into the offseason and talking a longer term extension past just the 2024 option that it is. I believe it is a club option with no buyout, but I'll have to actually look into that afterwards. But, obviously losing Walker Buehler for the rest of the season and the next season hurts a lot. They just did get Dustin May back. But going into the offseason, they're going to have legit question marks at the rotation because you have 3 of your guys in the rotation that are going to be free agents with Tyler Anderson, Andrew Heaney, Clayton Kershaw, and then with the loss of Walker Buehler as well. You can kind of look at having Dustin May, Urias, and Tony Gonsolin as your 3 there, but definitely some question marks. On the starting,
They might have
to
use top prospect Bobby Miller or top prospect Ryan Pepio or what a horrible situation the Dodgers are in, guys. I don't know what they're going to do.
Or new top 100 prospect Gavin Stone. I mean, I can keep going for you too.
Yeah, we can keep going.
But we'll go ahead and move over to the San Diego Padres, which is probably the biggest story over the last couple of weeks, which Fernando Tatis Jr., we had talked about him a lot, and he was getting ready to kind of return, was getting ready to near that rehab assignment. I believe was actually even on rehab assignment and tested positive. I don't know what I think it was clobestol.
Yep.
Anyways, tested positive for a banned substance of PEDs. He got suspended for 80 games. Starting now, he'll miss, I believe it's the last 48 games of this year, the first 32 games of next year. And then while also serving that suspension, he's decided to undergo the shoulder surgery that was a hot topic for us late last year and then into the offseason to help with that 4 dislocations that he had last year.
Yeah, I mean, I just wonder how dumb you could possibly be. I mean, it's not the 1990s anymore. You're getting tested pretty often. I mean, and you're out there juicing. I mean, and I don't want to, and then to go on and give BS excuses about I'm taking ringworm medication and the fact that it's this is the name of the substance that he tested positive for is close to the name of a substance that's in some ringworm medications, but it's not the same one. He obviously looked it up on the internet and said, "Oh, this is my excuse." I mean, come on, man. Just it's frustrating. It's frustrating as a fan for the game because Fernando Tatis Jr. is one of the most exciting young players in the game. He's so fun to watch. He was just about to come back, and now you're going to have to deal with this whole thing, this 80 game, this 80 game thing suspension after you missed him all of this year. He's already the team was already a little bit upset with him because of the reason he missed this year being a motorcycle accident he had in the offseason. I mean, the guy really needs to mature some and take better care of himself and not feel the need to start juicing to try to get back quicker and not feel the need to come into the to go do a bunch of crazy stuff in the off season that can get yourself like severely injured. I mean, it's unfortunate. And obviously, when I say
I
that
think
the whole juicing thing and stuff, I don't think Fernando Tatis Jr. is a product of steroids or anything, because he's never tested
no.
positive before, and he was really really good before. He did not need to do this. Like, I don't
I
understand why he did this, and it's just dumb. So
I think it's
that's my
clear
thoughts on it.
from the the teammates kind of interviewing and giving their thoughts on it that they're a lot more disappointed that he was even in the position to need to to feel
Yeah.
like he needed to take steroids as opposed to actually taking the steroids. It's they were much more concerned that the fact that he was out the whole season with this wrist injury in the first place. And I think that's perfectly warranted. What was he doing? And that's the kind of thing that he's very clearly stated that he's remorseful for his actions. And I think with a longer offseason now to ponder it, if he shows up healthy and ready to go once that suspension is ended, I think you might see a different Fernando Tatis Jr. and a guy who may have a little chip on his shoulder.
Yeah, I hope he matures some. I mean, I hope that he learns that when you're a baseball player, you're getting paid. How much money is he worth? Like, on his contract, like, well,
337
yeah,
million.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, he's getting paid $337 million to play baseball, and there's certain things that you need to do to be able to do that. I mean, and things like speeding through traffic on a motorcycle late at night in the off season is not one of them. I mean, things like getting caught shooting up steroids for no reason really is a large part of it. I mean, it's to me it's just it's puzzling to me is but he's got to mature some, and he's got to learn what he needs to learn to do is he needs to learn how to be mature and do the things off the field that need to be done to be a successful baseball player long term. And but while still keeping all, he needs to keep that fire and stuff on the field that he has, because that's what makes him exciting. That's part of what makes him good. But he needs to mature off the field and not make a lot of these kind of wild risky decisions off the field. So hopefully he does that, and maybe this is a wake up call. There's a reason that you get a suspension for your first steroid thing. It's because sometimes guys need a wake up call and then they can be clean. And I hope that he gets clean and comes back next year and comes out and does well, because I don't really think I don't really think he's a product of steroids. I mean, I think you could probably call him a cheater now because he's shooting up steroids trying to get better. I mean, and that's against the rules and that's cheating. But I don't think he ever has been that guy. Now his dad is, but I don't think he has been.
Yeah, it probably is the wake up call. I mean, even in his interview today, he seemed, like remorseful, but he also just seemed to own the fact, own up to it more than most people who try to push it aside. Like, obviously, he's going to be in the public eye more because he's Fernando Tatis Jr. and everything that's been happening, um, with the wrist injury already, and there had already been the frustrations in the clubhouse, and I think you saw those boil over after the suspension. But I don't even think this was a thing of him trying to take it to get better. I think it was just him trying to take it to get healthy and try and get back, because I think he was feeling the pressure from the organization, from his teammates, from the public in general. I think he was just tired of hearing the questions and took something to try and help himself get there sooner. Um, so it will be a wake up call. He's still only 23, so I don't think this tarnishes his legacy in any way. Like, I mean, he'll be 24 when he comes back next year, and I mean, he'll have 10 to 13 more years of, being a baseball player that, if he's clean all that time, I think a lot of people will forget the one little hiccup he had at age 23
Yeah.
from it. But
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, there is time for him. Absolutely. I 100% agree.
yeah.
The
So,
the thing might
or go ahead.
be the thing might be that you say that, but I would say that I think our attitude towards steroids maybe needs to change a little bit, because we look back at the steroid era, and I think the biggest change was that those guys could play till they were 45. They were taking steroids for the longevity rather than the additional power, the additional ability to hit the baseball. Like Barry Bonds was a Hall of Fame player before the steroids. I just think that the attitude needs to be more of a, those were very clearly to change their bodies to be able to play for as long as possible, and this was a desperate attempt to get back a little bit quicker. I don't know that there's any sort of cheating going on there, and he's been rightly punished for making that desperate decision. And I think once we get there, if he never gets suspended for steroids again, then I don't think there's anything wrong with it, and he's going to have learned his lesson.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump over to our players of the week and wrap this episode up. So let's go ahead and start with Matt. So who do you have for your hitter this week?
So my hitter this week is, I'm finally going to make a homer pick. I haven't made a lot of them this year, but my homer pick is going to be Vaughn Grissom. I had to pick him because, well, it's really been the last 2 weeks since he got called up, but he has, over the past week, a 360 average, 385 on base, 520 slugging, and over his first 14 big league games, he has put up a 420 average, nice, a 463 on base, and a 660 slugging for a 211 WRC plus. He's hit 3 home runs. The home run he hit on Saturday tied the game that went to extra innings as a 1-1 game. So he really rescued the Braves on Saturday against Houston. His plate discipline numbers look good. This is a guy who had 22 games above A ball in his career before he got called up after some of the injuries the Braves had at the big league level. And all he has done is just absolutely come up and mash a 211 WRC plus. He's already been worth 1.1 wins above replacement. And when you look at the rookie leaderboards, he is already um, he is in the big leagues. He's already a top 20 rookie in the big leagues this year after just a couple games. He's not qualified yet, and he is. If I change, let me double check my numbers here. But I believe he's been worth more than Nolan Gorman, Seiya Suzuki, Vinny Pasquantino. These are some pretty high profile rookies that recently got called up, and he's only 1.1 wins above replacement behind like Joey Bart, or he's tied with Joey Bart. He's only he's not far behind some of these other guys like Bobby Witt Jr. and Brendan Donovan, Christopher Morel. It's pretty crazy how good he's been so far. Obviously, 441 BABIP. He's not going to keep this up all year, but I mean, he looks like another like legit steal that the Braves have made out of their farm. Well, it's not really a steal because they developed him, but he looks like another legitimate player coming out of that farm system that is going to be there for a long time. So it's been very exciting to watch him so far in the big leagues.
All right. Well, David, who do you have for your hitter this week?
Well, it is Albert Pujols, man. And this has honestly been super fun to watch, because Pujols has gone from being, kind of an afterthought. We kind of assumed, he's not going to get to 700 home runs. He'll get to like 690 or something like that before the season's over, and he'll retire without hitting 700. We won't get to see it in our lifetimes. And then, this week he's gone off and hit 7 homers with a 500 batting average. He's just gone absolutely berserk. It's one of those things that's helping the Cardinals win all these games, but seeing Pujols kind of rejuvenated like this is just kind of a throwback. It feels like the mid 2000s, but this is as good of a stretch as mid 2000s Pujols ever had. I mean, 7 home runs in 2 weeks is just a bonkers number, and he's 2 homers clear of everybody in the league over the last 2 weeks, and he's played less games than all of them. He's not even on the qualified leaderboard. I mean, his WRC plus starts with a 4. To give you how good he's been over this stretch. And with that, I mean, Pujols is, approaching quickly that 700 mark. He's only, I think, 7 away now at 693. So we're real hoping it comes and we get to see a 700 home run hitter in our lifetimes here, because after him, I don't know who may get close to this number again.
Yeah, I mean, it would have to be a super young guy that has already had a big start to their career, like I guess like a Ronald Acuna or a Juan Soto or somebody who's early 20s and already has a bunch. But it's rare, and I want to elaborate on that. Just, I mean, what do you think the chances are that he gets there? Because I don't think they're great, but man, he's got a legitimate shot now. Like he legitimately has a shot at it now. I still probably err toward he doesn't get to 700, but I mean, there's been a lot of players hit 7 home runs in a little over a month in about 40 games. So I think a lot of it depends on how much he plays. Because they've really just been playing him against lefties. But man, they need to throw him in the lineup every day right now. I mean, just pencil him in right now because he's so hot right now. It's he probably would be hitting against against righties too. So
Yeah, I err on the side of caution that he's going to get to 700
yeah,
this year. I mean, I really hope he does. Um, you know, but it's going to be a stretch. I mean, 7 homers in a month. I mean, or a month and a week or so. I mean, that's still a lot. I mean, that's still. I mean, I know he's hit 7 over the past couple weeks or whatever it was, but can count on that to keep up? Probably not. Um, you don't know. I mean, he's crushing lefties so much. And I wonder how much being in this stretch run, is going to hurt him if they're not able to throw him in there against righties as much. Um, but I really do hope. And, it does suck that I mean, not suck as much, but that he has still stayed adamant that this is the last year for him. And that he will not come back next year, even with the chance to go for 700. I have that sneaky suspicion that he's going to fall like 1 homer short, and he's going to end at like 699, and we're all just going to be devastated.
what I wonder if he wonder what decision he makes if he hits 699. Like, because I mean, we've seen both ways. We've seen like Roberto Clemente came back to get his last hit, to get to 3,000. Like, does he try to hit one more? I mean, come back and like sign with the Rockies or something stupid and try to hit one more home run? I don't think he does because that's more of just like a stat chasing thing. But man, I hope he gets it this year. I like you say. I said earlier. I don't really believe it's going to happen. But man, that'd be a lot of fun.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think he
Yeah,
would sign with anyone like the Rockies. I think
Yeah,
he would just go back to the Cardinals again.
yeah,
Um, but
but this stretch has just been a throwback, and it's really cool to see.
yeah. It has been
it
a lot of
really
fun.
is. Well, staying with the Cardinals theme, Matt, who do you have for your pitcher this week?
So the pitcher I picked this week was, we kind of briefly hinted at it earlier that it was going to be one of our picks here, but it's been Jordan Montgomery, and ever since he got traded to the Cardinals, he's been really, really, really good. Over his past 2 weeks, he has given up 1 run in 14 and 2/3 innings with a lot of strikeouts, 15 strikeouts, and no walks in those two starts, no home runs. He's getting the ball on the ground a lot. This is a guy that since he got traded over to the Cardinals from the Yankees has had a .35 ERA, a 171 fielding independent pitching, and a 268 xFIP. He's been incredible. Not walking anybody, which he didn't really walk anybody with the Yankees either. But the home run balls have come down. His ground ball rate has been a big deal for him because the Cardinals' infield defense is really, 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 really good, and they, especially with Arenado over at third, having like an insane defensive season this year, and a 51% ground ball rate definitely plays with that Cardinals defense. And then he's getting a fair amount of strikeouts now. With the Yankees, he wasn't really striking many guys out. 7.6 strikeouts per nine. Now, I mean, he's up to 8.4 strikeouts per nine. His K rate has improved to 26%, which is pretty solidly, right a little above average, right at average, for a guy who's not really a not really a strikeout pitcher. So obviously, he's not going to keep up a .35 ERA the rest of the season, but this definitely looks like a really good pickup from the Yankees. And for a guy who, in Harrison Bader hadn't even played yet for the Yankees, he's still injured. So definitely looking like a really, really good trade for St. Louis, and that trade that was really confusing at the deadline. So Very nice. Very nice for St. Louis to have have another guy because their pitching was kind of what was holding them back a lot of the year. But they're starting to look pretty formidable there now.
Absolutely, yeah. Jordan Montgomery's been a revelation for them. I think over the past 2 weeks he has like a .44 ERA, but I think over his first 4 starts there he has like a .45 ERA, or something with them, and been really a guy that they can count on to go out there and take them deep into ball games, be efficient, and just be really really good for them in general, and help Adam Wainwright kind of bear the load of that rotation because you haven't had Jack Flaherty all year. Dakota Hudson has been shaky for most of the season, and then Michaelis has had his moments of being really good, but then he's had his moments of kind of being shaky or rocky as well. So really good for Jordan Montgomery to go over there, get the opportunity. I always felt like a place like St. Louis would be really good for him. Get him out of like a bandbox out of Yankee Stadium and into a pitcher-friendly park like St. Louis was going to help quite a bit. But jumping over to David, who do you have for your pitcher this week?
Well, I was told that DeGrom was made a pitcher of the week last week, and he had an equivalent week this week to last week. The guy is just incredible. So I'm just going to name him, but I went ahead and got Justin Steele some love. Justin had a 18 innings pitched, 3 starts this week, and a 1 flat ERA for the Cubs. He has been really rock solid. He's striking out 11.5 per 9, and on the season, he's almost reaching 10 strikeouts per 9 innings. He's had a lot of really good outings from the left side. He's throwing 95-mile-an-hour fastballs, lefty, big curveball. He's introduced a slider for the first time this year. So while he's at the big leagues, learning to be a starter, he's incorporating a brand new pitch. And with that has come a lot of success, to the point that he really kind of looks like a solid number 2, number 3 starter for the Cubs going forward. And he's really filling a hole that I think the Cubs were hoping to find some solutions for this season, and he's been outright excellent. But especially these last 3 weeks, I mean, the Cubs have been playing good baseball these last couple of weeks, and Justin Steele is a big part of why, because he's had such remarkably strong starts, that he's able to keep the Cubs in the game even when their offense isn't performing, and then they're able to win it late.
Yeah, Justin Steele's been like you mentioned, he's kind of been one of those young guys that has come up and kind of proven himself to be a long-term solution or a solution moving forward for the Cubs rotation, which had a lot of question marks coming into the year. Kyle Hendricks, we talked about him. He's out for the year now. You had Stroman, but he had battled his own injuries and inconsistencies. And really for a big majority of the season, it was Keegan Thompson that was really the guy that the Cubs could count on. And then Justin Steele, as of late, has really proven to be another guy that they can count on moving forward.
Right, and looking into what the Cubs were looking for this year, I don't think winning the World Series was really on the cards. Even though you probably want every season to be a World Series level season, but the Cubs needed to hit some answers. Right, they needed to find some solutions to the problems, especially with the starting rotation, and primarily with the starting rotation. I would argue that maybe the second most important thing that happened was Chris Morel, but Justin Steele and Keegan Thompson becoming viable starters for the long-term future is the most significant thing for the Cubs' future, and it's going to enable them to spend money this offseason, spend prospects if need be, hunt for a good trade and a good signing or two, and really take a step up into the Central, where they don't have to fill out that 2 and that 3 along with the ace position in that starting rotation.
Absolutely. Well, we'll wrap up the players of the week, or players of the last 2 weeks, really. Anything else you guys want to hit on before we wrap this show up?
Not too much. Just we got a little over a month left. Just looking forward. The division races worth watching right now are the AL Central, which is probably going to be the most interesting division race, especially since it seems pretty unlikely that these teams make the wild card. It is possible that a team out of this division makes the wild card, but fairly unlikely. So that those 3 teams within 3 games are probably going to determine who makes it, who doesn't. Obviously the American League wild card race with the Orioles in there, it's interesting. And then you look at the National League, the NL East is still really close at 3 games. I guess the NL Central is still kind of interesting, but really the big thing is the rest of the wild card race in the National League too. There's 2 or 3 teams for that last wild card, so definitely kind of between the Brewers, the Phillies, and the Padres for the last wild card there, as either the Braves or the Mets will lock up the first wild card, whoever doesn't win that division, and then in the American League you look at like a conglomeration of teams could potentially get that the last wild card spot. Right now, the Rays, Blue Jays, and Mariners are in position, but the Orioles are only a couple games behind. So, we'll see what ends up happening there. But definitely getting down to the stretch run here, and this last month is gonna be really interesting in the postseason races, and we'll see what happens. I'm excited to watch it.
Yeah, and I just want to say thanks for having me on again. I always love having a chance to speak my mind about baseball, and it's always good to hang out with you guys. And yeah, you can see the Bat Flip podcast on Thursdays on a couple of race cars in Osaka. Go ahead and tune into 3 Wide TV on YouTube, and you'll see the Bat Flip podcast on a bunch of race cars. It'll be good.
Yeah, we don't really mention that much, but we do a lot of the iRacing side and sponsor some cars in a league or two. But um, yeah, it'll be good. And like Matt mentioned, coming down into the stretch run, it's going to be interesting to see the final couple playoff races for the divisions, and then what the wild cards look like. Remember last year we had down to the last weekend, the last day, we had some wild card scenarios. Um, so hopefully we're able to get something like that again, and we can keep bringing you some good content here on the Bat Flip podcast. But that will wrap it up for this episode. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next week.